Y'all know it's getting cooler. Here's something I'm really looking forward to. Football games, pumpkin pie, Thanksgiving, turkey, and slipping into a cozy sweater from Quince. Quince is known for their Mongolian cashmere sweaters from $50. And it's not just that. All Quince items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands. That includes beautiful leather jacket, cotton cardigans, soft denim, and so much more. How are they able to do that? By partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the cost of the middleman, which passes the savings on to us. And Quince only works with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices. And of course, premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. Now look, I've shopped at Quince. I got some really great shades from them, as well as a cardigan. Very cozy, very cool. And look, in terms of how they compare to other luxury brands, literally just as, if not more, satisfying from the perspective of quality and coziness. So, get cozy in Quince's high-quality wardrobe essentials. Go to quince.com/corp for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/corp to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/corp. What's up, y'all? Y'all are listening to Living Corporate's flagship podcast. If you didn't know, Living Corporate helps organizations build employee engagement and market trust through data analytics and data transformation, our e-learning platform, and brand marketing storytelling. We're so excited for you to be here today. The conversation you're about to hear is going to connect the dots between employee experience and go-to-market effectiveness. If you're not ready, get ready. Here we go. Christina Thompson. What's going on, ma'am? How you doing?
Good. How are you?
I am doing. You know what I'm saying? I'm doing well. I'm doing, but ultimately I'm doing. You know what I mean? I'm making it shit. You know how it goes. Listen,
Yeah.
I'm so thankful and appreciative that we were able to be connected recently. For those who maybe be listening for the first time, Living Corporate. This is our flagship podcast, but we're really we're an experiences management company. And experience management means we're thinking about ways to drive employee engagement and customer trust and helping organizations really solve that. So much of that, though, when it comes to a business, comes down to employees. And I think about, especially as I've become a parent, right? I don't know if there's a lot of content discussions out there related to just working while being a parent, especially working while being like a parent of a young child, or working while being a parent of a child that may have very specific needs. And as I think about especially Black and brown working people, whether they are professionals who have their own company or if they work for someone else, like parenting, caregiving for those who may have very specific needs while also being a part of a historically marginalized group, I believe is a really unique and differentiated experience. And so, you're here today to talk about your journey and your work. Talk to me about the work that you've done, or kind of like what you've learned, like just being a parent while also managing your own business. Like, what has that been like for you?
Yes, thank you. I think it's been a real, I would say, eye-opening journey because, I started out, working like anybody else, doing the 9 to 5 grind, working for someone else. And during that process, I learned that, certain businesses or corporations or entities, a lot of the times families are not the center of their care packages. If you look at a benefits package, you'll see insurance, especially as someone like myself who's traveled and worked abroad as well. I know what's possible and what could be out there. So I think that was eating at me a little bit too, having lived in Germany, seeing that you can have, a couple of months off or even years off after you have a child versus here, you know, um, when you come back, you might come back in as little as 6 weeks. And so, that, really kind of had me to start to questioning things and, questioning, how I can continue to do this work when I, centered around diversity, equity, inclusion, intercultural learning, but also make time for my family. And so I decided recently, as of last September, that I was going to step down. I was going to take charge. I was going to focus on my organization called Compare Global Education Network, and I was going to care for my son who was diagnosed with autism at the age of 2. And, for me, it was really important to be there to make sure he had the appropriate therapies. And, but I just couldn't find that balance in taking the time off that was really needed to get him the therapy that he needed and also hold down that full-time gig.
So first of all, congratulations on having your own organization. And it's a beautiful thing to be able to have the flexibility to be able to prioritize as you needed to, right? I think so many professionals, irrespective of their race and gender, but certainly Black and brown folks and Black women are in this position much more often than I think we discuss, but they don't always have all the tools. And so they end up really like juggling and maybe not juggling as well as they'd like to. Related to you talked about your time overseas, like, and just other things you've seen, like being in Germany and seeing, like, what are your goals for the holiday season? Whether it's traveling internationally or connecting with your family and friends in a new way, a new language can open doors to meaningful conversations and cultural appreciation. I want y'all to check out Rosetta Stone. It's the most trusted language learning program available on desktop or as an app, and it truly immerses you in the languages you want to learn. Now look, I've used Rosetta Stone. I love it. I'm really focused on trying to learn Japanese. I'm not going to, flex on y'all on this ad, but I'm telling you, it's fire. I love the fact that it's immersive. I love the fact that it's able to help me really practice and really get into the language learning experience. You know what I'm saying? Now look, Rosetta Stone is a trusted expert for 30 years with millions of users in 25 languages offered: Spanish, French, Italian, German, Korean, Chinese, Japanese, Dutch, Arabic, Polish, and more. Fast language acquisition immerses you in so many different ways. No English translation, so you really have to learn, speak, and think in that language. It's an intuitive process. You pick up language naturally, first with words, then phrases, then sentences. It's designed for long-term retention. And its built-in true accent feature gives you feedback on your pronunciation. It's like having a personal trainer for your accent. It's convenient, flexible learning, anytime, anywhere, because you can go through your mobile app on your desktop at your schedule. And it's an amazing value. The lifetime membership has all 25 languages for any and all trips and language needs in life. That's lifetime access to 25 language courses, Rosetta Stone. So don't put off learning that language. There's no better time than right now to get started. For a short time, Living Corporate listeners can get Rosetta's lifetime membership holiday special. This offer will not last long, so visit rosettastone.com/today. That's unlimited access to 25 language courses for the rest of your life. Redeem your holiday offer at rosettastone.com/today today for yourself or as a gift that keeps giving. What I would imagine you're going to say the maternity leave, but like, were there any other jarring aspects of like your additional healthcare benefits overseas that were just like compared to America? Because I agree, right? I remember when I got married and it was just me and my wife, right? And like the insurance wasn't that bad. In fact, actually, because we got married young, and so I was actually on my parents' insurance. And I remember, I was like, okay, I was just comparing things. I was like, okay, for myself, it's not that bad. And even for one other person, it's not that bad. But it's almost like they penalize you for having kids. Like it gets really expensive really quickly. Right? So talk to me about your experience. Like how, in what ways did being overseas really open your eyes to how different the benefits are here?
So just for context, when I was in Germany, I was a graduate student. So this is prior to kids, but I still had the opportunity to engage with the healthcare system. I just remember walking into the doctor's office in Germany, and the first thing that made me kind of have a mind shift, I had a really bad cold. I was stuffy all week, and I walked in and I went to the counter to pay, and he was like, 10 euros. I was like, 10 euros? That's all? Like, where's the rest of the... So that was the first thing. The second thing was he actually prescribed me with rest. he said, I want you to rest for 5 days. And I was like, where is the prescription? So I think two of those things. And then so I figured, I said, okay, I was upset actually, to be completely honest. I was like, so, you go to the doctor here, they're quick to give you an antibiotic. They're like, and now get back to work. And I think that that kind of opened my eyes to see like the importance of rest and how that's not incorporated into the culture, that working culture that we have here in the US. And then, I would say, so the cost is another thing. As you talked before, childcare is very expensive. A lot of times in other places that I've worked or lived in my work, other places, you get to take a nominal amount of time away, especially after you first have a child. And then after that, certain things like childcare and insurance, it's just already given to you by the government. So you were talking about a completely different system. I think that the way that it was described here in certain political campaigns is universal health care, which is, wildly unpopular for some reason, but in concept, people like the idea. And so I think that, as a business owner, as I started to look at how I wanted to incorporate some of those things with Compare, is to really offer those who work with me a package that would emulate some of those things that I learned abroad. For example, like we don't work on Fridays. I know the Friday mark is really, no work Fridays is becoming a trend. I hope it becomes a bigger trend. But that really allows me as a parent to be more available. I can go to my son's school events. I try to schedule his appointments around that day. To me, having a 4-day work week is more inclusive to families. And so I think that's one small thing that I kind of took away from some of my travels and seeing how other folks or other companies work. Childcare is a big issue. And I think, right now, if you do have the funding to actually pay for childcare, you're still looking for a good, reputable provider. And so one of the things that I've been exploring with my advisory board is how can we actually include, some sort of benefit for childcare to incentivize those who would like to work with my organization to be able to have that incorporated into what we actually offer as a benefits package. It's difficult to find. There are a few companies that are doing that in the US, but not a whole lot. And so it's not like I have a very clear roadmap on how I can do this. But those are some of the things, two examples I can think of that we're looking to see how we can be more inclusive families.
You talked about your son. Congratulations on your family. That's awesome. I have two little ones myself, and they are quite a bit. I'm gonna be honest with you. They got a lot going on. Got one turning 2. They got another one who's 4 turning 5. But she might as well be turning 16. Every day I got something going on with her, Chris. But anyway, it's maybe another power from the day. You talked about your son being diagnosed with autism. I'm curious. I think about so I have sickle cell trait, and so when I was when the doctors told my mother that a sickle cell trait, she told me she burst out in tears because she didn't understand what that meant. She didn't know, and I'm 35, so this was like in 1989, right? So she's, just I guess a different age in terms of information. But what was your experience in learning about the diagnosis, and then what was the process in terms of just how you navigated getting that information?
Yeah, this is something I'm very passionate about because, I think I'm also someone who has ADHD. I've been very open about it. I think we need to talk more openly in our community about being neurodiverse. And so when my son was diagnosed as autistic level 3 and nonverbal, all those things, it was just a lot to process. At first, I was thinking, well, as a parent, you wonder, well, what can I do? First, you start doing the research. I started doing a lot of research and work. And then also, I wanted to connect with other parents that had a similar experience because I know that my son is going to have a very different experience in how he grows up in our school system, but also in the university system and the workplace, because he's going to be a Black man, in America. And so that is something also that gave me a lot of angst and still today, to be honest, I worry about because, he, I would say that those are some of the things that concern me. So I think immediately I started to doing the research and really what types of therapies that would help him. But I think most of all, it really activated my, I would say, activist side. I started to attend school meetings. I started to question the practices that they have in the schools. I started to fight with the insurance companies that would deny, the care that he needed. Private insurance is great, but also private insurance, sometimes can deny, need-based care. And so that's that could be a whole nother topic right there, because another reason why I stepped down from my, 9 to 5 position was to apply for Medicaid and Medicare, get my son the insurance that he needs as a disabled person. So, it's really been a journey. I'm still on that journey. I think I've gotten to the point now where I am able to join different social media groups like the Black Autism Moms group, or work and contribute to conversations with the National Society of Autism, and talk to other parents about what I've learned, and also share with them, that it's hard at first, but it gets, you have to celebrate those small milestones along the way. Like, for example, yesterday my son um, uh, got up, and we're getting ready for school. He got up and went to the bathroom and brushed his teeth. I was like, wow, that's fantastic. For me, that's a milestone. Might seem something small. He's 7 years old, but he did it on his own. So celebrating those small little milestones along the way is how I've been getting by. And I'm not going to lie and say it's easy, because it's not, but it is something I think that we have to do as parents. And then, I know everyone isn't meant to be an activist or an advocate, but inadvertently, you're going to be pushed in that position. So connecting with other folks in your community has been so helpful for me, so that I could find my allies and the folks that can mentor me and help me to use the right language in IEP meeting, use the right language at work, and so that I can file for, whatever leave that I need to continue to make sure that my son is taken
Well,
care of.
and to your point, I mean, everyone's not an activist or whatever the case is, but most parents are going to be activists for their children, right? So, to your point, like life will put you in a position where you're going to advocate for those things, because we advocate and we activate, organize, and advocate for the things and people that we care about. That's just human nature, right? And so, I'm curious to your point about neurodivergency, and even just like in the journey that you're on. You mentioned earlier your son is he's going to be a black man in this world, and navigating the world, right? Of navigating the world, perhaps the world of work, like he's going to. And if I may, what parts, where does the anxiety come from for you? When you mentioned that earlier, where does that anxiety come from?
Mhm. I think it's just a reality that we live in. We live in such a, how do I put this? I think my son is nonverbal. So, like, if there was an emergency, as of now, he wouldn't be able to communicate, And there was a case recently that a young black man was just walking down the street. He's also autistic. And, he was given a shot of a sedative that ended up ending his life. And, those types of stories are just common, and unfortunately common, I think. And so, recognizing that, the reality is that people of color, specifically Black people in the US, Black Americans, do deal with a different level of societal pressures. And we have to be hyper aware of our surroundings, even for those that are deemed to be peacekeepers in our society, may not always see us as that. And so if someone approached my son, which my family, we have lots of tall people, I assume he's going to be over 6 feet tall, he may not be able to communicate. And then autistic people sometimes may do things that society doesn't deem as normal. And I put that in quotations. He might wave his hands, he might walk in circles, he might jump around. I'm used to it. But if someone just saw him and they didn't know him, they may call the police. And the interesting thing is, sometimes my son has, what we call in community meltdowns. And that's just because he's overstimulated. He needs a break. I've even been told at the age of 7 by his doctors, call the police. Just call the police. And I just cannot bring myself to do that, because I know that there's a high chance they may not approach him with the care and understanding. And they may approach him, and adultification of Black children is a real thing. That's another point of concern that I do have. And so that's why, any chance I get to talk to my local police, talk to the local school district, I'm advocating for, more training and understanding on bias and the impact of how our personal biases can really impede upon the care and understanding that autistic people need, and especially autistic Black children.
To your point, I believe you were referring to Elijah McClain,
Yes.
who was given 2 doses of ketamine by the
Hmm.
attending paramedics, um, and who, though his family did not say that he was autistic, that it was believed that he was on perhaps on the spectrum, and so it's in I as a parent, right? Um, I too have those concerns about just okay, we do need help. I don't really want to call the police because we've seen time and time again where the police are not resolving or making the matter any better. And yes, right, like it's already really high stakes and high tension with an able body with a non-disabled black person. So when you add additional dimensions of difference, then the cause for concern raises, I would say, exponentially. So 100% received there. When we talk about the idea of neurodiversity and autism, what would you say are some common misconceptions as it pertains to that experience, and what does it mean to be supportive of those with autism, as well as what does it mean to be supportive? What can organizations do to better support those who are caregivers of those with autism?
Mhm. One of the practices that I use, because actually I also do an annual summit called the Global Respectful Disruption Summit. And it's really meant to, go back to some of those practices that I talked about earlier about questioning the status quo, reevaluating the things that we deem as traditional. And I think that, some of the things that organizations can do, especially to make their workspaces more accessible to neurodiverse folks, is to, you know, watch the language that you use. Deficit language, I think, is one of the most harmful things that I've seen, just also as a person who's been in leadership roles in organizations. Like, for example, instead of saying that Bob uses a wheelchair to ambulate, they would say that Bob, struggles with the wheelchair. That language is actually broadly used. Or, you can say that I know also I struggle with this too. So I'm not going to say I'm perfect, but using first person language, I try to always check myself and say, Dale is an autistic person. Then Dale has a person with autism. I probably have used it in this sense. I'm still learning. We also have to make room for folks to make mistakes and to correct themselves and to verbalize that correction. I think that goes back to include language use and say, you know what, I think I might have used second person language there. Let me go back and do that. So I'm doing it right now because I realized I used it earlier because we're sometimes kind of trained to do that. And then, creating spaces where folks can do their best work, focusing on strengths-based work like practice. I'm a big fan of Gallup Strengths. That is something that really helped me to talk to employers and also to my staff on some of the strengths that I have and I could bring to the table. I think a lot of times we focus more on the deficits and what someone can't do versus what they can do. So one of my number one strengths is responsibility. So if someone wants to make sure a project is sent through from the beginning to the end. That's something I know that's one of my top strengths, so I can do that. But a lot of times I'll see folks when they're talking with folks who are neurodiverse, they'll say, well, they have a hard time focusing. So we're just going to give them something that's, something like that. Instead of saying, well, this person really is great with pattern recognition, which is actually one of the number one strengths that you see across those who are on the autistic spectrum and have other neurodiverse cognitive abilities. And so I think that is something that takes practice, is something I'm still practicing. And I hope that more organizations will focus on the language that they use and create space also for folks not to feel bad or guilty if they do make a mishap or misspeak. And then the next thing I'll say is, bring in autistic voices to those spaces. Give them the opportunity to share what was best for them. A lot of times we talk about it from a third party and say, this is how it's going to be best for these people, and they do that across all marginalized demographics. But invite someone autistic to the table and say, look, what's going to work best for you? Because autism is a spectrum and it's a very complex cognitive, ability of thinking, I would say. And so, it's important to have those autistic voices that are creating policy, that are questioning policy. And then that way we can give folks what they need to be successful. And that is, I think the reason why in the DEI practice, we've been focusing so much on equity, which is giving everybody what they need so they can be successful where they are.
Chris, what's so interesting about what you're sharing, and it's this is I've noticed this as as a through line is, so we're having a conversation about, in this moment, right, rightfully so, about how to support those with autism, how to create environments that are more psychologically safe for those on the spectrum who have different, who are neurodivergent, etc. However, everything you're describing, those are just really great things to put into practice with everybody. Like, those are good things to just do as a leader, right? Those are just inclusive behaviors and attitudes to have, period. Like, this idea of deficit communication, I find really, really brilliant, because that's 100% how we communicate about everything. And it reinforces insecurities. It can wear at psychological safety over time. And so there's just different and better ways to communicate. And that is not only just the right thing to do, but also it's going to garner stronger results just from an employee experience perspective. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yes, I think, what I've created is I've presented recently in a conference on this very topic with Corey Saunders, who's someone else who's amazing, another practitioner in the field. And, we have vented on this topic along with Dr. Neil McKinney too, about, using the language that empowers and not the language that deflates. Using growth mindset language. I'm sure some folks might be familiar with Carol Dweck's, pedagogy around growth mindset. I think that's so important too. Instead of saying I can't, saying I can. All those things are connected to deficit language. And it really does create a more negative environment when you're not, effectively calling people in. We're not going to call people out. Like I said, there's a difference between the two, calling people in to more inclusive language. And so instead of saying, someone suffers with autism, saying someone is autistic, or saying that something like autism prevents them from living a normal life, saying that autistic individuals have different ways of interacting with the world. Another common thing that I've heard that, autistic people have told me is, instead of using things like low functioning, high functioning autism, say it requires significant support or has higher support needs. All of those things like inadvertently shift our subconscious in our mind. And then we'll start to see autistic people in a different light. We'll start to see Black Americans in a different light. We'll start to see women in a different light. Any other minoritized group, as you mentioned, and anyone, I think, who might be dealing with some mental health changes. All of those things that you mentioned, this language, I think, is the key. And that's been something that I've been working on, like I said, continue to work on. And I think it's something that we really need to see more of in the corporate sector.
Absolutely. I want to say, like, I'm really appreciative of us having this conversation today, because I will say, right, living corporate, we've had probably maybe 1,200 or so discussions like on our podcast, and a very small number of them are focused on or targeting neurodivergence, specific disability, certainly invisible disabilities. And so I'm appreciative that we were able to talk today. I want to give you space to talk a little bit more about your organization and where people can learn about you and the work you do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Compare Global Education Network it was created by a small group of international educators and myself. We wanted to create a space that challenged the status quo. And so what we practice at Compare is respectful, disruptive leadership. And I think, if I were to describe, some folks are uncomfortable with the word disruption, but it's based in disruptive innovation. If anyone is familiar with Clayton Christensen's work, in disruptive innovation. It's because of that we have a cell phone that fits in the palm of our hand or even on our wrists. It's questioning how we're using technology and making it more accessible. It's looking at the gaps in society and saying, how can we fill that gap? And part of what we do with Compare is we're taking kind of those tenets of disruptive innovation that have created some of the most groundbreaking technology. If you look at Uber and Netflix, I want to take that and apply that to education. Education is one of the most archaic systems that we have, especially in the US. We're using the same systems that we used in the beginning, and those systems are the reasons why we still have significant inequality in our education systems. And so, the respectful disruption leadership that we practice is really about looking at the human side of disruptive innovation and ensuring that progress doesn't come at the expense of people, but instead it involves them in the process and uplifts them. And so that's where we have the Global Respectful Disruption Summit. It's an annual virtual summit where we have folks tune in from all over the world to really bring all the thought leaders who are interested in the practice of disruption, but want to do it in a way that's respectful, that respects the culture that the folks are in, that live in, respects, again, it goes back to neurodiversity, respects how they process things. It's not about respectability politics. It's not about making people comfortable with their bias. It's about disrupting their bias, educating, and making that process of unlearning less shameful, but more of just part of life's journey. And so I think all of this, now that I'm speaking about this with you, I'm like, this is actually all connected to my son. He's probably the reason why I've been so passionate about creating this organization, to create space for everyone to be able to be themselves, be authentic to who they are, and then also show that everyone has their own sense of superpower. Like, as someone who is neurodivergent myself or neurodiverse, pattern recognition is one of the things that I've always excelled at in any position I've had. Maybe everybody's not good at everything, but I think, it's really about that empowerment, identifying those strengths. And so we really do that within the work that we do. Almost half of the folks that participate in the annual summit are neurodiverse. We have a significant number of those who have low vision or are blind. We also have, those who are hard of hearing or deaf. So we're really like bringing the folks that probably wouldn't have a universal design space where they can speak and share their opinions uncensored. And just really it's really linked to disruptive innovation, filling that gap and looking at what's not currently there and creating that space. And then we also do DI consulting and learning experiences. And again, going back to that same practice of respect disruption, about questioning what's there and how we can make it better for everybody.
Her name is Christina Thompson. Chris, thank you so much for being a guest. Make sure y'all click the links in the show notes to learn more. Click engage. Matt, Chris, we hope to have you back as a guest again to talk about this work, talk about your work, talk about the very critical need to be inclusive of everyone, including those who are on the spectrum, including those who have various visible and invisible disabilities. Thank you so much for your work, and we look forward to talking to you soon.
Thank you so much, Jack.
Thank you.
Living Corporate is a podcast by Living Corporate LLC. Our logo was designed by David Dawkins. Our theme music was produced by Ken Brown. Additional music production by Antoine Franklin for Musical Elevation. Post-production is handled by Jeremy Jackson. Got a topic suggestion? Email us at livingcorporatepodcast@gmail.com. You can find us online on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and living-corporate.com. Thanks for listening. Stay tuned.